Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the modern market, where every day we discuss everything to do with the modern market. That is the crypto market, the NFT market, and how to hopefully navigate the Trump presidential market and everything that is coming out of the White House. Today, we loaded up for discussion. We have Bitcoin jumping straight to 81K from 76K on a tariff delay fake news. Then it settled back at 79K. We're going to talk BlackRock CEO saying stock markets could fall another 20%, but could be a buying opportunity. Most CEOs believe they are in a recession right now. We're also going to be getting back to some on-chain activity. Finally, Fartcoin is outperforming, and Remus, which is the name given to a dire wolf brought back from extinction, ran to $9 million. Looking forward to Rahim's explanation of what on earth is going on there. I will provide no explanation up front. We've also got the latest on price action on crypto and NFTs as usual, plus a general chat on where we think the market is going. Today, I've got Legendary and Rahim with me in the co-host seats. We're ready to get into it. Just a reminder, friends, nothing that we say here is financial advice. This market is very, very risky and everything is very unpredictable. So please proceed with caution, exercise your own judgment, and do your own research. With that out of the way, Rahim, it is Tuesday. It's the 8th of April. How are you doing?
GM, everybody. It's been super awesome, kind of getting back into routines. Dubai summer is hitting. That's not very exciting, but there's a lot of people been moving to Dubai. There's a lot of stuff happening, especially with like token getting closer. Met some market makers yesterday. Met a bunch of friends like a couple of days ago. Like it honestly feels like the energy in real life crypto people is just like so much more energized than like crypto Twitter right now and stuff. So it's kind of nice to see that a lot is happening around token in Dubai. So looking forward to that. So far so good this side.
That's pretty exciting. And you were saying a lot of people are actually moving there as well, like making the move. What's your sense when you ask people what the kind of key reason was, without going too philosophical, deep, like what's the kind of key reasons that you think people are making that jump at the moment?
So I remember like until 2 years ago, I would say like a lot of people that were moving to Dubai were mostly like consumers and traders. I feel like in the last year and a half, I've seen like a lot of builders move here, and a lot of like hedge funds and VCs, and I think that's been like a big shift. And like the overarching common statement is that like everyone's like pretty afraid of EU regulation. A lot of it is just like not working out for like builders in the European Union. So we've had like a massive influx of people just moving from there. And there's just like a lot of investment coming from Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Dubai. So like a lot of builders are like, you know what, hub is here, investment is here. So it's time to maybe take that leap.
Interesting. I do say sometimes that when you dig down deep enough, the answer is always tax, and I think that might be one of the reasons. However, I genuinely think that there are additional reasons going on as well. So yeah, fine, it's a favorable tax environment, and that is the go-to thing that people think, but there's a lot more going on there than people probably give credit for, I think. So wanted to give you a chance to share that. Legendary, what's going on your side? How are things before we get into the headlines today?
Jim, doing quite well. I'm excited that we are slowly turning into a political show, because that means we can talk a bit more macroeconomics on the one hand. On the other hand, we had this short pre-show discussion where we were saying, what does this actually mean that we're talking more like politics and all of those things that are happening? You made the point, maybe it's a result that crypto is an asset class that's becoming more mature, and now it's important to talk about all those exogenous factors having influence on that. I was thinking, yes, that is certainly true to a very large extent, but maybe there's also a part of me that's a bit more cynical that says there's nothing inherently interesting in crypto to talk about these days, because this stuff is so dominating and overshadowing everything else that we simply cannot really have the classical show where we have three main headlines to pick out from the industry, because they are just not there at the moment. So we have to talk about this more exogenous stuff that has this massive influence on our industry.
Yeah, it's an very, very interesting point. It's kind of like a catch-22 situation where there can't be any more interesting stuff because everyone is waiting for this stuff to play out. But this stuff, who knows how long it's going to take to play out. Therefore, there can't be any more interesting stuff. we seem to be at a standstill in some ways. But the thing that I'm kind of interested to talk about as we get towards the end of today's show, yes, we're going to do the tariff stuff. Yes, we're going to talk macro, as is incredibly important to do, and we will do that today. Interested to get into Rahim's section towards the end, where we talk Fartcoin and Remus. Look, I know they're just on chain. It's just like a daily runner potentially, but I think it's interesting to observe that happening after the period of time that we've just been through, and see what we think. Because I think that on-chain activity is pretty important and can be a useful indicator when things start to pick back up, when people feel a bit more confident to start to take more risk, I think. So very intrigued for that conversation. Anything else, boys, before we get into it? Any final reflections there?
I'm excited for Rahim's part as well, because given that I'm now in my biohacking era, I have explored that use a bit more from a, well, quote unquote scientific background. So I'm quite curious to see what Rahim will say on the on-chain side of things, and I might have some additional comments to make on that.
Yeah,
I love that. I'm excited. I'm excited for the discussion as well.
We have basically provided no explanation. Remus is, well, I guess I did, the name given to a dire wolf brought back from extinction. If you have missed that piece of news from yesterday, there was a corresponding meme coin. But as you said, Ryan will talk a little bit more about that later, and maybe Legendary is going to be providing the scientific basis for all of this too. So we're looking forward to that conversation. We're going to do all the tariff stuff first, but before we get there, let's get you up to speed with everything that's happening in the market itself. We've got, starting with the majors, we've got Bitcoin up almost a couple of percent to 79K. We've got ETH up 5% to 1.5K. We've got XRP up 6% to 1.9. BNB's up a couple to 557. Solana is up almost 9% to $108. So green across the board, bouncing from what was obviously an astonishingly bad set of few red days in a row. On the meme coin side of things, Doge is also up 8%, Pepe is up 3%, Trump is up 2%, Bonk is up 5%. Fartcoin, as we noted, outperforming everything, up 25%. Even on the week, it's up 9%. Got SPX, which is down 6%. WIF is up a couple of percent. So actually, they may be bouncing these these memes, but if anything, they're only marginally ahead of the majors, which does beg the question, what's the point in having this kind of risk if they're going to move in the same way? Fartcoin being the obvious exception, completely outperforming absolutely everything. Actually, MOG is up 17% as well. So that is interesting to note. Getting into the headlines themselves, we have Bitcoin jumping straight to 81K yesterday. It was at 76K at the time. There was that tweet that talked about a tariff delay, and it ended up being fake news. It was pretty much dismissed by the White House pretty quickly after. Bitcoin's then settled at 79K, but very interesting to see Bitcoin react so strongly on fake news. It reminded me very much of the ETF fake announcement, if you remember that back in January, and the market completely sent. It was fake. It then recorrected, but it showed where the pent-up demand was and what it was waiting for. So I thought that was intriguing. Also, we've got BlackRock CEO coming out yesterday saying the stock markets could fall another 20%. He believes, most CEOs believes they are in a recession right now. He did go on to say that it's probably a buying opportunity, so we'll touch on that. Fartcoin outperformed plus 25%, and Remus, as we said, the name given to a dire wolf brought back from extinction, runs to $9 million. If you're watching on screen with us, remember we're live on X video and YouTube too. This is the first dire wolf howl in over 10,000 years. This wolf was extinct, and now they've managed to bring it back. So intrigued to dive into that in a bit. Some notable price action, along with Fartcoin being up 25%, Titcoin is also up 25%. Interestingly, Berachain has dropped another 10% to $3.86. That's actually an all-time low. It's just crazy how fast these markets are moving at the moment. It was only maximum 7 to 10 days ago where we were talking about all the crazy yield on Berachain, how exciting it all was, and I still think all that stuff is going on, so it's still potentially very exciting. But to hit an all-time low just seems like our fingers have just snapped once, and that's where we are. I was like, okay, cool. Did not realize it was that low so quick. So just wanted to bring that up. So that's on the normal price action side. Legendary, is there anything we need to know on the NFT side?
Yeah, one quick comment before I move to the NFTs. You know what this makes me think when we have Sonic, Polkadot, not Polkadot, Sonic, Chain being very exciting for a brief moment in time, having attractive yields, and then we move on to farm the next L2. But I'm actually really excited for some of those stablecoin based chains to drop, which we have talked about on the show, where I don't need to worry about that. It's the same thing with ETH. We talked about Ethos. We had the founder on the show, right? And I have vouched 7-ish ETH, and I'm down on that already, more than 30%. I'm just excited for an environment that is very stable, no pun intended. Moving on to the NFT side of things, though, we've seen a bit of a recovery yesterday, so most of the things are actually up. This time, however, it's not the Bored Apes which are leading this. It is the Pudgies and the little Pudgies. They are up 8% for the little ones. Pudgies themselves, the big ones, up 2.5%. Also a significant move in the latest collections, which is up 5.6%. And interesting to connect that to your Berachain news is, because we've spoken about it yesterday, the steady teddies are still very, very steady. Yes, and I'm kind of repeating myself from yesterday. They are down another 6% over the last 24 hours, but they're still up 45% over the last week and still holding strong at this 167 Bera floor now.
Good stuff. Steady Teddy's doing what they are supposed to do, according to their name. Getting into the rest of the Web3 roundup, there's a few more interesting things going on today. The Pectra upgrade for ETH has been announced to be May the 7th, so that's in around a month's time. XRP leveraged ETF is going to go live before the spot ETF has even been approved. Thought that was interesting to note. While LibertyFi prepares for an airdrop by proposing a vote to distribute a small amount of USD1 to World LibertyFi holders. Remember, that's the organization run by the Trump not the Trump administration, the Trump family's business endeavor. Aerodrome announced Flight School, which is a V-Aero airdrop for users who lock more than 2.5k Aero. Remember, that's the kind of main DEX on base, which gets the most volume. Pakistan announced former Binance CEO CZ as a crypto advisor. These jobs are pretty interesting at the moment. Strategy reveals a Q1 unrealized losses of $5.91 billion. They've obviously been buying at the tops. Saylor has routinely said he's very happy to buy at all periods of time, but that does mean their Q1 stuff means they're down a little. ETH BTC ratio broke beneath 0.02 for the first time in a long time. It was the lowest point since February 2020. Pretty savage price action for ETH. Ex-Kraken employees buy a majority stake in real estate company with plans to use company treasury to buy Sol and Solana validators. I'm very interested to see different companies pursue like a micro strategy playbook, but for other assets, like be revenue generating, and then what are you going to do with your profits? And then finally, this is cool on the IP side. Lil Pudgies announced a casting call for a new YouTube show seeking to license 50 Lil Pudgies for this submission. So that's pretty fun. That's the Web3 roundup to get up to speed with everything else that's happening in the space before we get to the main conversation on tariffs and wolves and BlackRock. Legendary, what's catching your attention more generally? And then I want to come to Rahim too.
Definitely the ex-Kraken news, because it's something where I had a change of heart. Like a couple months ago, I would have said, this is cool to see more companies trying to do this playbook. We had the ETH Treasury as a main headline for a biotech company just a couple weeks ago. But now I'm starting to think it's actually this copy pasta playbook of Strategy did it with Bitcoin. So now this company is going to be used as a shell to buy this that cryptocurrency. And I just don't think this is a very sustainable thing to do in the long run. This is why I'm now more excited when we have the actual companies adding BTC, adding whatever cryptocurrency to the treasury, who have an ongoing business model, which then means they can be successful, prosper, and if they like so add more to their stashes than those quote unquote shell companies that are copying Strategy and just doing the same playbook but with another currency.
So you think doing it with any other currency is pointless because every other currency is too risky, or you just think what's the view?
The view is just that I don't think this will keep people interested. It worked because strategy is the first one. It does it with the biggest one. But if you now have some real estate company buying Solana, you have some, God knows, hairdresser buying HBAR, I just don't think this is going to be very, very interesting in the long run to the market, especially as you will see strategy is an established company and they've been doing that for years. It's different, but for the other ones, you will then see just a high premium on the net asset value and like, okay, why shouldn't I just buy Solana? Or why shouldn't I just buy the Solana ETF once that thing is live? I feel like with strategy, the market is still valuing that way above the BTC spot price. And that's what the market does. So that's obviously fine, but I just don't think this playbook will work out with a copy pasta companies who try to do the same.
Interesting. Fair enough. That's an interesting take. Rahim, what's catching your attention? Any comments there or anything else that you're interested in before we get into the main stuff today?
I am very appalled by the lack of reaction, not just by the entire Twitter timeline, but even you guys, about how everyone just like kind of passed over this whole fake news, the CNBC 90-day pause tariff thing that came out yesterday. Like I was reading, I don't know if you guys saw the Kubesi letter tweet, but in a matter of 3 minutes, they added about 3 trillion in market cap from its lows for S&P 500. And like based on like fake news, and I was like, that's a colossal amount of money. We talk about like scams in like crypto, and like, you know, like the timeline is like crazy about it. It's people are very passionately like calling out people. It's probably because people are directly invested in that, but I was like, it's pretty crazy of how people are just like this keeps on happening over and over again. You spoke about the ETF Gary Gensler tweets that happened last year January, and now you have these fake news. Like it's absolutely insane to me that we just like pretend like, yep, fake news happened, let's move on, it's okay, like no investigation, nothing. Pretty crazy. I'm like pretty like $3 trillion, that's a lot of money.
Indeed. I was actually going back yesterday to look up the ETF fake news one. I was like, how did that actually play out? Like what was it that happened? And it was literally, I mean, it's unbelievable. Like if you actually cast your minds back, it's unbelievable that the SEC account 1 day before the announcement was supposed to happen was hacked in some way. And that tweet went out. Just, I think it was only 24 hours before the other tweet was going out. So in a sense, it didn't have like huge ramifications in a way, because it was like 24 hours between the fake tweet and the real one, and in the end it all happened as it was supposed to, I think. But it is crazy. And then you've also had some other Cointelegraph ones, right, where Cointelegraph I think it was Cointelegraph out of the media tweets, which have kind of really moved the markets aggressively. But I think the deeper issue that it speaks to, I guess, Rahim, is people really take what they see, and this is something I've realized in general in the space, like the level of rigor that we would have been expected to research stuff as a lawyer at a law firm. I've just noticed in general, whether it comes to research, whether it comes to even deal making, most people, this is like an observation on everyone, and I don't know if this is negative or positive, it's just my observation. People don't, I think it's not that they don't care. It's just that they're more like open. It's just like, yeah, things will be fine. Things will be fine. Like, I'm just going to go with it, whether that's on the research side, whether that's even on the deal making side. Whereas when you're coming from that kind of academic, it's not even academic background, it's a specifically legal background where every sentence needs to like be joined up, and it can actually be a negative thing, because you're always trying to nail things down and make things perfect, and that can actually lead you to being too slow, too perfectionist, too paralyzed, because you can't make a decision. Whereas I feel like other people are far more flowing with it, and you know, there's pros and cons to both ways. Any reflections there?
Yeah, it's kind of scary to a, sorry, Rahim, just to jump in real quick. It's kind of scary to a certain extent, because ultimately look at this stuff, and we'll cover it in the menus, right? So if you said, oh no, I'm going to wait and see if this is a fake news or not, because I don't think this will end so fast, you would have missed out on the gains, A. And B, the people who bought it because they're like, yeah, I don't care. That's the news. It will trend. It'll go viral. Doesn't matter if it's fake or not. Let's buy it. You are still up more than if you had not bought that, because the market, yes, sold it off, but it did not sell it off to the level that it was before. Like not 100% of the buyers were like, oh fuck, this news is fake, so let's sell 100% of what I just bought. They were like, meh, might as well hold it because we're up a bit and we only corrected down a bit. I mean, I know other stuff has moved as well, and there might be additional reasons that are going on at the same time. It's a bit of a dangerous predicament on the one hand, and on the other hand, I'm honestly surprised we have not seen yet a like large scale, high effort fake news attempt at something, like where you see a fake CNN video with a deep fake Trump announcing something more dramatic, see more news pages being hacked, so that it has like a bit longer of a lifespan than just 2 minutes. I'm honestly surprised that most of the like hacking we see and fake news efforts are like rather low effort. Here's a tweet because I hacked someone, I hacked the SEC. I mean, that's probably not low effort to do that, but the media delivery strategy of fake news is pretty basic so far.
Literally, not everyone's got your Sora plus Claude plus various LLMs convening with you. Is that what you're looking for? You're looking for them to collaborate with various LLMs. Otherwise, it's not good enough.
Probably, yeah. That's the game plan, yeah.
Rahim, you wanted to have a final take here, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a very spot on take, Ledge. I think you're absolutely right. It's crazy of how we've excelled so much on the AI front, but you don't see as much of like fake content or fake videos circulating around to essentially expedite information like this. But I think I think that's a great thing to think about. I just think, just adding to what like Ledge was saying, it's also that philosophical discussion, right? Like we moved from the early 2000s, from the age of information to age of curation of information, and now you have so many like news medias and news channels, and half of them probably piggyback off of like other news channels and stuff, so they don't even have their own sources. So at some point you're like, okay, if I'm going to research on it, where the hell am I going to research? Like my direct line of communication between the White House is a media company, and if that media company is not like giving me right information, who am I supposed to do? Like text the crypto Caesar? Like what am I supposed to do? So yeah, it's a very weird thing, but like I really hope at some point we come up with ways to just like dive into it, investigate into it, because I feel like, yeah, we talk about like rugs and stuff and everything, and people who take money and like flee away or like rug the project. But like you just don't know of how many people behind the screens are shorting or longing these markets and putting these news out, and it completely goes under the radar as, whoops, these are leverage traders, they're going to leverage trade. And you just don't know how much money these people make.
And this is such a big issue, right? And I think it's something we see in the media every day. And you in particular, B, will see that when you research the news and you try to find the original source of something. You will have a media house, you will have a newspaper, online publication who's quoting, well, this information comes from an article that our colleagues at, say, Cointelegraph have written. And Cointelegraph is like, I'm just making up, I'm not saying that Cointelegraph has been doing that, I'm just using names now. Cointelegraph is saying, well, Coindesk has written that, and so on and so forth. And then you find the original article, which is just quoting someone who posted a post on X, and you think, oh, I saw it in 3 newspapers, it needs to be legit, but they're all quoting one another, and nobody did like some original research on that.
I mean, now that you say that, I can't even remember what the source for this one was. And frankly, I don't even know what the source for saying that it was fake was. Could have been like fake denial. Yeah, who knows? It's a complicated one, but as you say, doing your own research and getting to the source as quick as possible, still value in that kind of core skill still, to figure out like what the right play to make is. So that is that interesting conversation. We're going to actually touch on that a little bit more again when we do the bigger analysis of the price movements. We've also got an interesting segment. We're going to be talking about, yes, the fake news pump, also the developments with Besant and the Japan negotiations. Going to do a little focus on China because increasingly that's coming into focus. And then also a little bit of stuff on the military budget, which I think is pretty important too. That will take the majority of the show. Looking forward to get into that conversation in just a moment. Before we get there, let's get to our partner segment for today. We're doing our Polkadot explorations. Love a little gaming segment, Legendary. Let's get into it.
Let's dive into gaming on Polkadot. In 2024, the Web3 gaming studio Mythical Games has completed its transition from Ethereum to Polkadot and created the Mythos superchain. And there's two Mythical Games major launches that we're expecting for 2025. Game number one is Pudgy Party. That's a game we already have talked about. It's a mobile game featuring, obviously, the popular Pudgy Penguins IP, launching globally on both iOS and Android this summer. And unlike the more competitive games, Pudgy Party is emphasizing inclusive gameplay where players team up to dodge obstacles, complete collaborative missions, and unlock shared rewards. The cool thing is that you can use your own Pudgy, you can customize the NFT characters and build around that. The second flagship game by Mythic Games is FIFA Rivals. Players build and manage soccer clubs, engage in strategic player trading, complete thrilling real-time matches. And that game is, as the name is giving it away, developed in partnership with FIFA, also free-to-play mobile game, and also expected to launch this summer. And John Linden, who is the CEO of Mythical Games, believes that the game could actually attract more than 100 million players globally, which then makes a lot of sense to build this on top of Polkadot because you definitely need that scalable infrastructure. Personally, I'm quite excited to see both of those games come to life and get my hands on them this summer. Big thanks to Polkadot for sponsoring this segment, and stay tuned for more weekly explorations.
This one looks sick. I think all three of us are Pudgy Penguin holders, so that's pretty cool. I know Legendary, there was some other games where your Penguin's been integrated to stuff already. I think it's really cool to like roll that out to other people as well, to allow people to participate in that way. And I'm a big football fan too, so excited to see how what they build out with FIFA. Funky, our resident Polkadot expert, chime in here. Which of these games did you want to comment on? What's the deal?
Well, I just wanted to ask you, B, if you've played one of their other big hits that has existed for a while, which is NFL Rivals. So they have a game that's in the iOS store and I think on Google Play as well. That's an NFL-based game, and know that you're a big NFL fan. So if you haven't checked that one out, while you guys are waiting for Pudgy Party and for the FIFA Rivals game, NFL Rivals has been out for a couple of years.
Excellent. I need that NFL fix. I like NFL so much, Funky, and for the people who don't know, it might sound like I wouldn't like NFL because when we talk about football, for me, football is soccer, right? But I like NFL so much that I'll watch the NFL. I'll watch the NFL discussion programs like now in April or May, despite the season won't be back until whenever it is, September or October. They have nothing to talk about. Maybe they talk a little bit about the draft. Maybe they talk about, I don't know. They're literally just filling up. It's the equivalent of if we were running a crypto show with no market to talk about, basically. But I'll even watch it in the off season. So I'm excited to try that out. I'm going to take a look. Thanks for that, Funk. Right. Want to get to the main stuff today. We have a lot to discuss. Want to set you up for this, Ledge. Look, there's so much going on at the moment, and we're doing our best to like give people little segments of what we think are the most important things. Ledge, today we thought the fake news pump we found interesting. Besant's negotiations, Besant's increased importance, plus his revelations about the negotiations with Japan. Also, China's coming more into focus. We want to talk about that. And slipping into the conversation is this record military budget. So all of this relative to the market, everything is super relevant to us at the moment. Let's take it away. What do we need to know?
Yesterday was one of the most chaotic trading days we have ever seen. A lot of things have happened, so let's break them down step by step. The first thing we had mentioned on the fake news already at one point yesterday, the S&P 500 did swing from a loss of 4.7% to a sudden gain of 3.4% within minutes, adding 3 trillion to the market, as Rahim has said before it then plunged once again. And that was triggered by, as we have said, a fake post saying that President Trump is considering a 90-day pause on tariffs, which ultimately was very quickly dismissed and denied by the White House. Yet the market had already pumped on it. It had sold off some of those gains, but did continue to trade higher than before. Apart from this fake tariff hope or fake delay hope, a couple of more substantial things have happened as well. One of them being the negotiations between US and Japan, which are being led by US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who had said that there's been a very positive conversation between President Trump and the Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba. and that there is 50, 60, maybe 70 countries, that is the wording that Scott Bessent had used, who are at the same time looking to negotiate deals and trying to resolve those trade tensions around the Liberation Day tariffs. Then the more massive thing, where I'm going to spend a bit more time on, is the further escalation in China. There's two main things that happened there that you need to know. First of all, President Trump has warned he'd slap an additional 50% tariff on China's imports unless China retracts their new retaliatory tariffs by today. If implemented, that would push the total tariff on Chinese goods to more than 100% to 104% to be precise. But China did something else on top of that, another retaliation, by halting exports of 7 critical rare earth metals. Basically, you need rare earth in almost everything that's electronic these days, in all semiconductors, phones, everything that is being built that's an electronic device with a semiconductor in there needs rare metals. So they are in quite high demand. And it also happens that China is controlling 70% of the world's rare earth supplies. And they said they will put a stop on 7 of those, that they're not to be exported for the time being unless this situation is being cleared up. And Beijing clearly said, and I'm quoting here, that they are ready to fight to the end. And they are not budging, and they're definitely not giving in right now. So this is definitely something we will have to report on further, as it looks like we might see some more escalations in the tensions and trading policies between US and China. And as you said, a very quick fourth news that's also relevant. President Trump himself announced that he will be requesting a record-breaking $1 trillion Pentagon budget for military spending. And that is, and I looked up the numbers on that, amidst what is already an all-time high for military spending. So in 2024, $2.46 trillion globally have been spent on military expenses. If you break that down by the entire population on the world, that means actually that every person on the world has, quote unquote, has spent $306 on military expenditures. And that number is up significantly from 2023, where it was at 2.3 trillion. But more importantly, it is the steepest increase we've seen in now 18 years. And again, if you just look at the absolute number, military spending globally is at an all-time high. So the key takeaways here are, on the one hand, we have positive news coming from Japan and other countries that are signaling to find a quick end to those tariffs, to the Liberation Day tariffs. China-US tensions are escalating. We have the threat to have a total of more than 100% tariffs for imports from China to the US, as well as the rare metal situation. And then we also have a significant increase in military spending, both from the US, but as well as globally.
Oh, okay. Excellent set of summaries for various kind of connected things going on, some more connected than others, but they're all relevant in the general conversation of what is going on at the moment. So thanks for that summary. A couple of directions I want to go in to add to that, very much linked to each other. The first is more on the news side and then zooming out. So we had this piece of news, I think it was actually, it was yesterday as well, actually. So you mentioned China. One thing that's going on at the same time, just trying to share my screen here, Ledge, if we can just adjust the settings. We've got China Sovereign Wealth Fund stepping in to support stocks plunging on the trade war. So this was the news that China intervened on Monday to support domestic stocks plunging because of the US tariff woes, with the Sovereign Wealth Fund increasing its holdings in equities and saying it would defend market stability. So this is, the Shanghai Composite Index lost 7% on Monday in its worst day in 5 years, reeling after the additional tariffs that were placed on it. Investors were dumping shares across the board, worried about the prospect of increasingly vicious trade war and a global recession. So I think on the one hand, you have this commitment from China to defend its own market. And when we were speaking about yesterday, when you're trying to abstract this out and be like, well, why is this relevant to people's cryptocurrency bags? Like, what is the game? And I've referenced yesterday Arthur Hayes talking about how in the end, crypto can be a simple game sometimes. It's like if the money supply goes up, then crypto will go up as well. If there's debasement going on, then crypto will go up. And I think the things that we're trying to connect together here is this situation in China where it seems like they're going to need, if these tariffs go ahead in the way that they're expected, they're going to get hit very, very hard. Yes, okay, there's a big discussion on what's going to go on in the States as well, but just focusing on China for 1 second, they're going to get hit super hard. They obviously export a hell of a lot of stuff to the States. And so the idea is that they're going to need to start to defend their own market, and they're going to need to print in order to do that. So that's on the one hand. And then staying on China more, and maybe just zooming out just a touch, because everyone is talking about being a tariff expert or focusing on tariffs all the time. Ray Dalio published this article, I think yesterday. He's been producing a bunch of educational articles, if only to publicize his next book launch, which I think is coming soon, and he always references in the articles, but they are super helpful and the books are very good. And this one yesterday he published was saying, don't make the mistake of thinking that what's now happening is mostly about tariffs. So, tariffs are the headline. Tariffs are the thing which are hitting you in the face. That's what people are talking about. People are talking about the tariff numbers and everything going on there. But the position that this article is taking is that this is way bigger than tariffs themselves. It's about the monetary and economic order, which is breaking down. It is about domestic political order, which is breaking down. It is about the international geopolitical world order being broken down. And there are all kinds of changes in these forces, which he speaks about in, I think, I can't remember the name of the book, but the most recent one might be How Rich Countries Go Broke or something along those lines. And the idea is that, look, we're at one of these pivot points in history, or that's where we've been kind of moving towards for quite some time. And yeah, you can be talking about tariffs, but one of the key ideas he has is that as world powers move from their ascent into their decline, there's always this period of time where the currency comes under pressure. Maybe it was a reserve value for one period of time, maybe it will not be forever. And in that period of decline, there's always conflict. Every single time, as Dalio has studied, whether it was with the British, there was a conflict. Whether it was with the Dutch, there was a conflict. There's always a conflict as these kind of empires go into, or as their superiority starts to become challenged. And so I think that is what he is urging people to consider, not to get necessarily lost in the specific numbers in the tariffs, but just look a little bit bigger. And that's why I thought today it would be helpful to start looking at China, focusing on China, because look, that's the other power, right? That is the one that is in direct conflict. And so maybe open question, we need to be keeping that conversation, or just looking in that direction more, reporting on it more, if we want to understand what is going on more fully. Ledge, I want to come to you first with some initial reaction there, and then Funky's got his hand raised as well. I want to come to him.
Yeah, I have quite a few thoughts on that. Let me structure that. So first thought is optics matter a lot in China, and we've seen the Chinese government, or we've seen China selling of US treasuries for the last now 15 years. They bought them at one point. They thought it's cool to have them. They thought it makes sense from an economic perspective. But then they also realized it's actually not the best look to have US treasuries, US being the biggest rival in there, and they are selling off more and more and more of the treasuries. And they reached an all-time low since 2009. In the holdings, I think they sold off another 47 billion over the last year or so. Yes, 57 billion exactly. Sorry, that was the correct number. According to Financial Times, it was sold off last year. Now they're holding $759 billion in US treasuries. There's like this thing going on with the treasury sell-offs, with this focus on how are we like positioning ourselves and what narrative, what picture do we want to paint. And as part of that, it's been interesting to also see It's going to sound very unrelated, but I'll connect it in a second. On YouTube to see, what's his name, iShowSpeed, that like very famous streamer, now being in China and suddenly having access to all of the coolest Chinese cars and highlighting the features. A car that, you know, you have an iPhone connected to the car, or not an iPhone, a phone, and you connect it to the car and you tilt the phone around and the car does the same movements. The car can basically stay in the same spot and do like a full 360, can do many more things. And a bunch of other American YouTubers who suddenly are highlighting Chinese cars they did not share before. And they had one of the flying cars that he could access quickly. So I do think that they are now starting to play the content game even stronger, especially like on quote unquote Western media, because obviously TikTok is a whole separate thing. And we talked about TikTok when we talked about the US portion being sold and seeing from the OnlyFans creators to Amazon, so many companies being interested in that, and also seeing that China is holding back to comment what will happen with that. So I do think that I very much agree with you, B. There is like this larger conflict at hand, and there's like this fight for the global hegemony going on, and who's going to lead this. Is it going to be US or is it going to be China? Tariffs are part of that, but so is the entire communication, so is the entire media strategy. And it's so interesting to see this like push for Chinese cars and Chinese EVs and showing what they can do, hitting on the YouTube and TikTok algorithm so hard at a time when we have the tariffs escalating and when we have the US trying to fight for domestic cars, which are cool and which are the ones that should be bought. So I do think there's a bigger picture than just tariffs to look at.
Yeah, very interesting. I'm glad you brought up the treasury situation, because I think that's something people are looking towards a lot as well. Might want to double click on that in a second. We'll come to it for you for your thoughts in a sec as well, Rahim. But Funky, your hand is raised. What's your take here? What's the weight we should be attaching to the focus on China here? What is your take?
No, I read the Dalio article yesterday, and I want to touch on some stuff that Legendary brought up, some great data points. So what we're seeing, obviously, yes, this is much bigger than tariffs. And the one thing I would say, and I'm going to preface the rest of my comments by stating that things of this size, when we're talking about these kinds of changes, and yes, there's a bit of fear mongering, I think, in Dalio's words, right? Like, these things take sometimes decades to unravel. So it's not like it's going to be overnight, all of a sudden, like the globe is going to destabilize economically, politically, so on and so forth. It is a winding down of these things that take a long time. Just look at the sweeping arc of history. I'm sure you guys see that. To Legendary's point about China, we also see the same thing with Saudi Arabia. They've been deleveraging their balance sheet from U.S. treasuries for many years now. China is trading with Saudi Arabia for oil, directly with yuan, so they're not even using US dollars as the proxy anymore for trade. So we talk about sort of the death of the petrodollar. I think this is the big reason why, for instance, the US government is particularly keen on stable coins being the first thing that gets legislatively approved, because it does continue sort of the US dollar hegemony across the globe. If it's going to take over the blockchain space, I think that's really important to acknowledge. But the thing in my mind, having read that piece about Dalio and having just read a thread from Punk 6529 the other day that he brought up years ago, I think the greatest variable in all this and the destabilization, whether it's politically, economically, so on and so forth, is what is the impact of AGI going to have on all of this, right? Like, how much is that going to radically shift everything for every major player, both the US, for China? What does it mean for them to have all these resources and these special metals and make the semiconductors and everything else? So like, this is a super fascinating conversation. I know we don't have time to unpack all of this, but I think it's worth noting and something that we should probably maybe talk more about in the Discord, or just, have on another show or something like that. I'm sure these things that we're starting to witness are going to take time to play out. And I'm sure we're going to have some very fruitful conversations moving forward.
Indeed. Appreciate the additional insight, Funk. As you say, big box we've kind of opened here. Final point I wanted to make, and then maybe Rahim will come to you on this just for a thought. The CEO of Bybit had this to share yesterday, again, specifically thinking on China. He said, US versus China tariff war. China will try to lower the RMB to counter the tariff. Historically, whenever the RMB drops, a lot of Chinese capital flows into Bitcoin. Bullish for Bitcoin. This was quote tweeting Arthur Hayes, who was saying that whenever CNY is devalued, the narrative that Chinese capital flight will flow into Bitcoin. He was also saying, ignore China at your peril. That is happening there. Brahim, any closing thoughts on this topic before we maybe go into some more on-chain stuff?
Yeah, I just to add like on some of the bits that you guys already spoke about, I was reading an article yesterday about China opposing. So she and the fashion company that is born out of China, now they operate out of Singapore and a couple of other countries. They basically spoke about like changing the supply chain across the world to kind of like fight this whole tariff war, where they got like basically opposed by Chinese government being like, no, you guys shouldn't do that. So almost to the core of like the fashion industry, they're like, you know what? You don't need to worry about this. You don't need to diversify your supply chains. Let's keep it the way things are. And I just think it just goes down to like exactly what you were talking about and stuff. Like they're like not backing down, and to see like so much focus on coming on all the different industries, whether it's the communication industry, the tech industry, the fashion industry, the education industry. I think it's more and more important for us to keep tabs on what happens with China, because they're clearly going all in fighting this whole trade war.
Yeah, I think that's completely right. I don't know. I'm just reflecting now, and maybe this whole. I saw a couple of tweets earlier which was suggesting that everyone in the West underestimates China because you don't get the full news, and we've got this kind of Western bias. But likewise, people in China probably don't get the full story of what was going on here, and you just got these two sets of participants in the market who are not fully aware. Like if you think about some of the stuff, I mean, I'm definitely not as well read up on the stuff that's going on there. So yeah, I think it's definitely worth it. It's the biggest conflict on the horizon. If it's not on the horizon, it's here immediately. So it's obviously worth understanding much better, because rather than it being some kind of cold conflict where you keep it at arm's length, there's obviously something that there's going to be a tussle now, which is going to keep affecting the markets which we operate in. And so that is why we will continue to cover it to the extent that it is relevant to our Fartcoin and Remus bags. Moving into the next segment in that way, Raheem, we've had a bit more action on the meme coin side of things. What's going on? Is there some signs of life? What's the update here?
So Fartcoin basically had like a pump of about 25% in the last 24 hours. Just to recap everyone, this is a token that came out of Truth Terminal when we had like the surge of like AI ecosystems in Web3. That's where this was birthed out of, on fart jokes, on humor. There were these narratives that the oldest joke that exists on the internet are fart-based jokes and stuff. So the narrative essentially comes from that. So it's been seeing, like we've talked about this on the show a couple of times, of how Fartcoin sees like ridiculous amount of volatility over like the last couple of weeks and stuff. It's trading at like 600 million market cap. So it's been showing signs. It's like there have been like tweets around that if you actually compare whether it's private equities, whether it's like other assets, that Fartcoin at the moment is the best performing asset in the world, which is just like a ridiculous idea to think about, which also leads us into the next meme coin that kind of blew up, which is Remus. You know, we've talked about like AI bots and AI agents, which was the future side of tech. Now we're talking about tech from like ancient history or provenance, if you want to use those buzzwords we use in Web3. So basically, there's this company called Colossal Biosciences. They've been existing since 2021, raised a couple of $1 billion. They successfully brought back extinct animals. That's what they mainly focus on. So they brought back they use DNAs from fossils that are aging like 12,000, 70,000 years, and they essentially regenerated two direwolf on I believe like 2 weeks ago. They came out with this news. They put out a video where you can actually hear them scream, and it's considered like a big technological advancement. They've been working on some other animals as well. I believe I read the Tasmanian tiger and a couple of other ones. So they've been like heavily focused on bringing back extinct species. Rather fascinating to see the direction they've been going. It was funny when they posted all of this on Twitter. The comment section just felt like we were like, it felt like an NFT project, because like random people were just like posting random animal pictures and being like, "Oh, when are you bringing this back?" And they would just respond to it, "Yeah, that's exactly what we are working on right now." So it just seemed like, they were just like ship posting. There was a one particular comment of somebody asking them, being like, "What is the value? Why are you doing this? How is this good for humanity?" And one of the reply from their official account was that the dire wolf is important in the animal kingdom and in the animal ecosystem, and it's going to help conserve the environment, which I just thought was like such a corporate answer to give, because like these wolves like haven't existed for like 75,000 years. So it's not like animal life hasn't existed, but it is definitely fascinating to see just from like a scientific point of view. For people who don't know, that my background is actually in molecular sciences. That's what I studied. So to see
This is the
me
perfect
covering something,
synergy for you.
yeah, for me to cover something that's like biomedical related on the market, modern market show, feels kind of full circle.
The
But
first
yeah, the
biomedical
CRISPR
meme
technology,
coin.
you know what, this is exactly what I was thinking about, is when whether it was BitTensor or when we had like the surge of like AI coins, one of the ways that our generation or the younger generation of people got exposed to this new venture that the world was moving towards, regardless of how long it lasted, was through like these AI coins. You had all these like AI bots, you had AI16Z, you had AIXBT, a bunch of things, and that was the exposure that everyday degens got into that vertical of innovation. I think it's very fascinating that if you were to being like, okay, I want to get exposed to de-extincting animals, how do I go about this? How do I go about investing in it? And right now, for a random degen on the internet, like the only way to invest is probably in something like Remus. It is something that went up to like 9 million market cap, so not ridiculous numbers as we would have expected a couple of months ago. But it is just interesting to see those, and it's sitting at 13 million right now. So it was nine up literally 45 minutes ago. So it's interesting to see the animal, extinct animal meta now like coming back, even when the trenches are dead. So it's just a very fascinating time to see all of this come to fruition.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's some is fascinating stuff from the scientific perspective. Ledge, I think you wanted to. I had one thing to say, then I want to pass to you, and we're running out of time today. My thought was that it's interesting. There's more an observation on meme coin investing, where I think we all say with a very straight face, like, oh, the only reason, the reason why those AI coins went up was our generation was looking for exposure. And so obviously that was the only exposure, as if that's a reasonable way to look at it. Like, it is absolutely unreasonable, I think, to say that a random meme coin is a way to get exposure to something. Like, that's just like calling a bunch of crap, like, and just giving it a name and then saying this is my exposure to a whole industry that is actually valuable. So like there's like a lot of because I agree with you. It's funny how we speak about that as, oh, the way to get exposure. It's like, that's not exposure. And the reason why I was thinking about that is because one of the conversations we've been having privately and on the show as well is like, how do we get exposure to robotics? Like these humanoids, these robotics things. Okay, Tesla's public market. You might have noticed on the timeline, Andrew Kang and a couple of other people have kept announcing recently they're getting these Series A deals and these humongous robotics companies. And oh, wouldn't it be nice to get a slice of that? But we can't get a slice. I don't think the way for us to get a slice is to start some meme coins with a bunch of robot names and then say, right now, this is my slice of the industry. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that's something we tried to do, and maybe that will be a meta at some point, but it's not a real way to get exposure, which I think we have very much learned from the AI coin cycle, potentially. Curious for your just a quick response there, Rahim, and then want to give it to Ledge.
Yeah, I think like it's very important to be mindful with all of these things. Like don't ape into these things exactly. Like don't justify to yourself that this is me investing in future technology, and I can tell my friends that I'm invested in the future of the world with these things. We've seen this before, so be cautious. This is never financial advice, but like these things are just like vaporware, and we just come up with different ways to justify it.
Yeah, I think that was the reality with some of the AI stuff in particular. Although I'm sure there will be some gems amongst all of that. But anyway, that's on that side. Ledger, I wanted to give you a chance to come in here. I know you're very intrigued from the scientific side. A final thought on this topic before we close out.
Yeah, I just wanna nerd a minute about this because I think it's super cool. So the way they did it is they took DNA samples from a tooth and from a skull, from the dire wolf that is, and they basically used that to look at the genome from the dire wolf and look at a regular gray wolf and find the differences in its genes in the DNA. And they found about like 20 traits that make the dire wolf and that make it different from the gray wolf. And they basically were able to then take cells out and edit those bits of DNA. However, you have to do that like very mindfully and carefully because, for example, there's like one specific bit where you can change the code of the gray wolf to match a dire wolf's code. But if you edit this in a like very specific way, that would lead to deaf and blind gray wolves. So what they did is then they actually had to edit other genes which remove the red pigmentation and other pigmentation so that you get like the dire wolf color basically matched without turning the poor wolf blind and deaf. And this is how they went on about this process. Then they had wolf ova, which they denucleated and put in the edited cells. And then the gestation happened and you had created a dire wolf. Also interesting to note, and maybe that's a bit of market alpha for those who did not care about my last 2 minutes of a DNA-based rambling, is that they have already made experiments with a woolly mammoth, and they did that on mice though. So they basically managed to have mice that have the like coat and fur of a mammoth, and also they're working on an elephant, basically on an elephant surrogacy, but for them the gestation period is like 2 years. So there might be some sort of DNA altered elephant meme coin coming to the markets in 2027. That's maybe something to keep an eye on, to have a bit of a lighter news for the end of the show.
I mean, we've obviously had the animal coins going. Now we need this the extinct animal resurrections. That seems to make perfect sense in the universe that we live in. So looking forward to that. Great show today, guys. That is time though, unfortunately. Remember, we do this every single day, Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern time for 1 hour live on X video, YouTube, and you can catch up with us on Apple and Spotify too. Thanks to Rahim and Legendary for co-hosting with me. Thank you so much for joining us as usual. Have a wonderful day. Take care, and we'll be back as usual tomorrow, same time, same place. Bye bye.